Alright, what's good y'all? Soul here, and welcome back to my story mode. So two things. One, I would like to apologize for being completely inactive as of the past week. I have been quite occupied. October has been a very busy month for gaming. And anybody that knows me or has been even following this channel for long enough knows that I am quite the little gamer. So not only have I been indulging myself in all of the awesome games that have been coming out this month, I've also been making content for said games. More on that at the end of this video. Getting back on topic here, it is now nearing the end of October, which means it's officially been about 8 months since our last official set of news on anything Pokemon related. Now, of course, this comes as to no shock, considering the fact that we are gearing up for a brand new Nintendo console that we're probably going to know about within the next couple of months. And because of this, a couple of weeks ago, I decided to make a video talking about this previous era of Pokemon. Essentially, I asked if this era of Pokemon was good on the Nintendo Switch. Surprisingly enough, it was actually quite the mixed bag. Of course, a good majority of you guys said no, which is completely understandable. Absolutely makes sense. But there were also a good couple of you that said that you did actually have a good time with this era of Pokemon and that you would just like to see a much better future. And that got me in the mood to talk at least one more time about this current era of Pokemon before we jump into the next one. With that being said, you have seen the title and you have seen the thumbnail. Today, I would like to talk about 7 things I love about modern Pokemon and 7 things I don't necessarily love about modern Pokemon. And when I say modern Pokemon, I mean very specifically the mainline game. I'm not referring to the spin-offs this time. Y'all know me, as much as I love talking about spin-off games, we don't really have much to talk about anymore considering the last relevant one that we had was Detective Pikachu, which I didn't even play. So you guys already know the drill by now. Go ahead, grab a snack, maybe a full-blown meal, maybe a burrito that you can slather some grape jelly on, and let's talk about 7 different things that I love and don't love about modern Pokemon. I know that the title and thumbnail say hate, but that is such a stressful word. Anyway, why don't we go ahead and start positive here and talk about the things that I love about modern Pokemon. Let's go ahead and start off with the fact that I very much enjoy modern Pokemon designs. You would think that about 2 decades into a franchise that the designs and ideas would start to dwindle a little bit, but clearly that is absolutely not the case, at least not in my opinion. There are so many times in which I have to rewrite the list in my head of what my top 10 favorite Pokemon are, simply because some of the designs that we've gotten in recent years are so damn cool, I don't even know where to place them. And naturally, of course, how good the Pokemon actually is does usually factor into that, but 9 times out of 10, if I like the Pokemon's design, I'm gonna use it, and if it's good enough, it's definitely gonna make it into my top 10 one way or another. Armarouge and Ceruledge being the latest prime examples, these two are some of the sauciest Pokemon designs I think I have ever seen in my entire life. Shanks, my goat, my god, trust me, you are the greatest to ever do it, but man, you're starting to have some competition, I can't even lie to you folks. And this is not even considering the fact that regional variants give older Pokemon a chance to be way cooler than they were before. I am thankful every single day of my life now that Obstagoon is a real canon thing. It makes me so unbelievably happy that they took the already very adorable design of Zigzagoon and thought, you know what? Not only can we make this even more adorable, we can make it awesome as hell as well. Now, don't get me wrong, there are still some absolute stinkers, as there are with any generation of Pokemon. Turning a piece of Tumbleweed into a Pokemon is probably something I should have figured they would do, but simply didn't, and I'm still not a fan that they did it at all. But even though Bramblegast exists in that generation, we also have Scovillain, Tinkaton, Houndstone, and King Gambit for Christ's sakes. Not every single bit in the batch is gonna be absolute perfection, but damn it, you can definitely see that a good chunk of it is still pretty damn good. And maybe it's because I've been with the franchise for so long now that it's just so easy to see the difference in quality between Fakemon and real Pokemon. It really is night and day that they spend so much time crafting these Pokemon designs. It's just something I simply feel doesn't really get as much appreciation as it should. And to top off all of this, which kind of brings me into my next topic, I do enjoy the designs for a lot of Mega Evolutions, and on top of that, I think I just really enjoy the fact that gimmicks are a thing in general in modern Pokemon, and usually now a standard as of late. Playing Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl again made me realize that it is so strange to not have a Pokemon game with any form of gimmicks applied to it. I mean, to be fair, by that point we had already been working with gimmicks for the better part of 8 years. Now, of course, the fact that the game was just lacking in general didn't really help its case. But most people agreed that one thing that definitely would have helped it was actually having a gimmick to change things up a bit, much like the Gen 3 remakes did. Which leads me to believe that regardless of how we feel about each individual gimmick and how we compare them, we like gimmicks in these games a lot more than we let on. And I'm gonna be completely transparent with y'all. I don't know how y'all feel about it, but me personally, I love the fact that we have gimmicks as a thing now. I love the fact that with each new coming generation of Pokemon, we get to look forward to what they're gonna throw at us next to really change up battling. It's so interesting to see what kind of creative gimmick they could come up with that could make us change up battle strategies. Of course, much like I said with Pokemon designs, not every piece of the batch is going to be perfect. There are aspects of gimmicks that don't always necessarily work as well as we would like them to, or maybe they work a little too well sometimes. But it's the fact that we have these powers at all and we're able to utilize them in our own unique strategies and playstyles that makes them so interesting and fun to play around with. Gimmicks are here to stay, which is why I, like a lot of you guys, are very excited to see Mega Evolutions come back in Pokemon Legends EA, but I'm also looking forward to brand new gimmicks that they're going to introduce to us in the future. Moving on from all that though, another thing that I absolutely love is the fact that they've actually attempted at true, genuine stories in the last couple of Pokemon games. Now don't get it twisted on two things. Firstly, this is not me saying that they haven't attempted on genuine stories before. And two, it's not like there haven't been stinkers. There have absolutely been some stinkers in the modern era of mainline Pokemon stories. However, we would never have gotten something like Pokemon Legends Arceus, for example, during the DS or Game Boy era. A mainline game that takes place solely at some point in the past, at a point where people and Pokemon still aren't really all that attached to each other yet. Could you really imagine getting a story like this even attempted during the 6th or 7th gen era? Cause I certainly couldn't. Even in the DLCs where they take all these different characters and their lores and history and all these different regions that apparently connect to each other a lot more than we thought that they did, they are doing that now more than ever with modern games. What in the world do you mean that there's a Unovan school of battle that is underwater? What are you talking about? That is awesome, dude. But just generally honing in more on the story aspect here. While I do appreciate something like Rivals, for example, Silver, in Pokemon Gold, Silver, Heart Gold, or Soul Silver, we never really delved all that much into his story, into his background. I mean, the same goes with a lot of very early Rivals during that point in time, but it really heavily applies mostly to Silver in my case because Silver had some of the most interesting backstory that we never touched upon at all until like more recent years with animations and whatnot. Hell, we have more information on a character like Hop more up front and center than we do on Silver, and that's saying something. We see throughout the course of Pokemon Sword and Shield a character who is consistently overshadowed by his champion older brother, on top of the fact that his brand new rival is already outclassing him in every single way, shape, and form on the journey that they started at the exact same time. That is a very interesting approach to a story that I would love to see fleshed out even more than it was. But even if that little plotline isn't as honed as I would have liked it to be, I don't think we got anything nearly as deep as that on much earlier games. Don't get me wrong, the writing in Pokemon could still absolutely use some work. However, we are getting to know much more realistic characters now. Characters with hopes, with dreams, characters that suffer, characters that feel true grief and frustration at certain things. Trust me, this is coming from a 4th gen junkie, and as much as I love 4th gen story, we didn't get nearly as deep as anything like that with a majority of our characters. But modern Pokemon writing has opened the door to a lot more possibilities, and that makes me so excited for the future with a lot of different characters for these games. Now, I guess this kind of feels like backtracking. I probably should have put this first, but another thing that I like that's kind of within the same realm as what I was talking about right now is the fact that we do have a lot more characters with fun personalities and designs. One thing I will say is that even if the character writing in 8th gen in of itself wasn't all that flawless, we got a lot of really neat character designs and personalities. Just the gym leaders alone have a lot more personality and design than a lot of previous generations of gym leaders. Of course, depending on how they utilize them, they could be very hit or miss, but you know, I appreciate the effort. And that also applies to the rivals too, because I'm gonna need you to keep it a $150 with me, Chief. I know for a fact that you remember Hop and How and all of them, but if you can sit there and tell me the name of the rival from Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 without looking it up, hey, you know what? You're better than me, because me personally, I do think that the game was cool and very interesting, but I cannot for the life of me remember the name of that character because he just did not stand out as much as I would have liked him to. But then again, though, it's been about like 12 years or something like that since I've played Black 2, White 2, so don't take that comment too seriously, but regardless, you get my point. Regardless of how well they're actually written and fleshed out in the games that they're introduced in, they usually have designs and personalities that make them stand out enough so that we remember them. A character like Marnie, for example, should be well and forgotten. However, I still think about her every now and again because I would have wished more for her character because I liked her design and personality. Characters like Nimona, Arven, and Penny are gonna stick with me for a long time because those characters actually have some serious histories that are really interesting and fun and unique personalities. Long and short of it is, they've gotten into their bag of giving us more memorable characters that stand out for a longer period of time by giving them uniqueness, and that is something I am excited to see more of in the future of this franchise. Getting more into the actual gameplay aspect of things, another thing that I am absolutely over the moon about in modern Pokemon is raid battling. I made a video a long time ago talking about the potential damage that Pokemon Go did to the mainline franchise for Pokemon. And don't get me wrong, I still stand by a lot of what I said in that video. However, if there is one thing that I really appreciate that Pokemon Go did for the franchise is bringing raid battles into the mix. The moment, and I mean the moment I saw that raid battles were gonna be a thing in Pokemon Sword and Shield, I was over the moon because that is one of the most sickest mechanics they could have brought to the mainline games. Usually, raids offer good challenges, good rewards, something to do with your friends. And this may be just a bit of an exaggeration, but I feel like it adds at least like 10 hours of playtime to every Pokemon game because I easily get so distracted just doing raid battles, trying to get as many Pokemon as I can, getting the different forms or types or whatever of those Pokemon as I can through raid battles. It is such a joy to be able to do those. It also introduced a new type of togetherness for you and your friends in the mainline games. Up until the Switch era, the only thing that you could really do with your friends online was battle and trade. And don't get me wrong, it never necessarily got old because it was always fun to go head to head with your buddies and see whose Pokemon team and strategies worked out the best. But having that form of unity in raid battles to have to actually strategize together against an opponent is something that we didn't even realize the mainline games were lacking in. Being enemies or rivals is very different from having a common enemy or rival. And now this is something I simply don't ever really see going away for the foreseeable future. It's good, it's fun, it gives us more things to do in the game, and that's not something I could ever complain about. And speaking of actually having additional content in Pokemon games, I think it's safe to say that we are in an era where it's actually very good for Pokemon to have something like DLC available. Now, of course, this also kind of works as a double-edged sword because a lot of developers, Pokemon included, usually can take the advantage to utilize DLC as an excuse to not completely finish a game with all of the content available from the get-go. Now, of course, in the case of Pokemon, it's really hit or miss on whether or not they actually do something like this. However, I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing to have a bunch of content that they're still developing and working on and fleshing out and essentially just cleaning up so that we still have extra content to look forward to, whether it be the year after or whatever. Neither of the DLCs were perfect, but neither were the base games. Neither has any Pokemon game ever been. However, regardless how I felt about a very specific generation, having DLC to look forward to the next year after always gave me a semblance of hope because I always had something to look forward to in terms of content. And so far, they're like 3 for 4. I think they did a very good job of delivering most of the packages that we've got. Still lacking in polish, of course, on both ends, but hey, you know what? I still managed to have a lot of fun regardless, so I can't be too mad about it. And the last thing that I have listed here that I absolutely love about Pokemon is the general quality of life. We now have so many tools at our disposal to make sure that we know the actual ins and outs of all of the mechanics in these games that it is just so nice to just progress. Anybody that's gotten into the Pokemon franchise through the Switch era has never truly known or understood the struggle of HMs. Now, there were a couple of benefits for the franchise that HMs provided that aren't really present anymore, and we'll talk more about that. However, they were more of a hindrance than anything in the earlier ages of Pokemon. 9 times out of 10, the moves usually weren't very good unless it was Surf or Fly, and trying to get them off of a Pokemon if you put that on one of your mainstay Pokemons on your team was something of a nightmare. Which of course would lead a lot of us to utilizing HM slaves, which also wasn't really all that beneficial considering the fact that they would take up an entire slot on your team because you would never know when you would need them next. So now, 2 things came out of not having HMs anymore. One, the fact that we could traverse freely without having to worry about wasting a slot in your Pokemon's movesets. And 2, having access to your PC no matter where you are on the field. Those are 2 absolutely massive and necessary changes that I feel don't really get enough appreciation. Nothing would kill your flow more than realizing you needed to backtrack back to a previous town to have to go get a Pokemon out of your PC, put a move on them that was essentially permanent, and then keeping them on your team to utilize that move just to get through one rock or move one boulder. And then they were stuck on your team until you got to the next town, and that means that all of the training that you could have done for the Pokemon that was supposed to be there was now obsolete. It's one thing to have mechanics like that in something like Legend of Zelda, where you need specific items to get through certain areas. However, something like that is not very typical or common for something like an RPG. So while I appreciate the concept and the creativity behind it, it didn't really serve much of a purpose back then other than being an obstacle that usually just served in killing our flow. Now, of course, newer Pokemon games have found ways to rework these, whether they become TMs or just an entirely different mechanic. And that is something I will definitely always be grateful for, because getting into a flow state in a Pokemon game is usually very fun. All of that, and we haven't even mentioned the fact that we actually did get a lot of other different items and mechanics that allowed us to interact with this game in different and better ways. Things like the sandwich mechanic that allow us to camp anywhere in the field and actually eat a sandwich that allows us to hunt for very specific Pokemon. Gadgets and gizmos and mechanics that allow us to actually properly interact with the Eevee and Ivy systems. Things that could just simply easily be skimmed over by a new Pokemon fan, us older fans definitely appreciate having. We have definitely come a long way with this franchise, and I'm very glad for all of the changes that they've made and put an effort towards to make these games more fun. A lot of the time, I don't think we really go out of our way to notice the effort that they do put in to make some of these changes. And that's something that I definitely wanted to bring up and acknowledge right before we flip that coin over and start talking about 7 things that I hate about this franchise. I think it's very good that we started out on a positive note, because now it's all downhill. Heads up to anybody that's been following this channel long enough, a lot of this may sound very familiar, but if you're still here, that means you like complaining as much as I do about this stuff, so let's just go ahead and hop into it. The first thing that's gonna always come up in any and every Pokemon conversation when it comes to the modern era is the lack of quality. There has been one good-looking mainline game on this frickin' system, and that is Let's Go, the first true home console mainline Pokemon game, if most people even count it as that we had ever gotten on the Switch. After that, outside of the spin-off games, it was pretty much all downhill graphically. Long story short, everything in the graphical department looked like ass and ran just the same. Something that we were really hoping would actually improve after Pokemon Let's Go actually managed to go downhill. It also doesn't really help that we heard from the mouth of the developers that they were actually removing like a majority of the Pokédex at the time so that they could focus on quality graphics and animation, both of which we barely got. A bunch of you guys have already heard me say this over a billion times by now, but we can't really make a lot of excuses for the games to look like this when they run on the exact same console as something like the Xenoblade series or the Zelda series. Every year it gets harder to defend when there's plenty of games on the Switch that look and run just fine. It's just a little frustrating when we know good and well that this company has more than enough money to utilize the proper manpower to fix this kind of thing. Alright, moving on here, another thing that I kind of despise about this franchise is the lack of side quests and world building. If you guys know me, you know that I've had a problem with this since the beginning of this franchise. How is it that the most popular franchise and RPG on this planet doesn't have side quests of all things? I mean, don't get me wrong, I acknowledge the fact that Pokemon Legends Arceus has some, but why did we go back to having absolutely none in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet? They have had so many chances and opportunities to utilize all of these extra NPCs that they develop for these games to utilize them for side quests to help build their world a little bit more. There is almost no greater feeling when playing an RPG than actually feeling rewarded when you go out of your way to interact with the world. That is something that Pokemon consistently has a problem with doing for some reason, and I really just cannot fathom why. And now, more so than ever, that these games take place in open world, there is genuinely no excuse for this. I know for a fact that Pokemon Legends EA is probably gonna somewhat semi-rectify this problem and have some side quests in that game. However, I can't stop this gnawing feeling that Generation 10 won't. We'll have to see how things play out, but as of right now, there's no reason not to have this stuff, guys, so lock in a little bit for me. My next minor issue is absolutely the fact that we don't really have a lot of career options. I'm not exactly sure how to phrase this, but why is it that we don't have something like the battle towers anymore? Why is it that we're completely missing the aspect and concepts of contest halls all of a sudden? Those were such major concepts in things like 3rd and 4th gen, and then all of a sudden they just fell off the face of the earth. What happened? And if memory serves me correctly, we had it in 7th gen. We did have a battle tower of sorts in 7th gen, but as of the Switch era, it's completely kaput, MIA. Like I said, this one's definitely more of a niche one, more of a low-key one, but it's still so strange to me why we don't have stuff like that anymore. Moving on from that, another problem that I have with this franchise lately is the lack of puzzles. Now, I did state earlier that I am glad that we moved on from HMs. That's not something that we necessarily need to have in this franchise anymore. But for whatever reason, I guess getting rid of HMs made them believe that we just didn't really need actual or challenging puzzles altogether, which is absolutely strange as hell to me. I don't think we've had true, genuine puzzles since 7th gen, and that's definitely saying something because it's been a long time since we've been away from 7th gen. And the puzzles that we do get, usually before a gym challenge, is so bafflingly easy that I don't even really consider it a puzzle. Now, like I always say, never get me twisted when I completely understand that their goal is always to appeal to a younger audience. However, I will always partly disagree with that aim because a good portion of the people that play these games are the people that grew up with them. I say all of this because it leads into my next point. I'm upset at the lack of difficulty over the years. Whether it be through the puzzles or even the main mechanics that we interact with, like battling, we are all treated like children. As if we pick this game up, we can't possibly understand how to play it on our own. We have to have it explained to us and have our hands held for a good majority of the game like we're 10 years old. I don't know. I just think maybe, just maybe, for the most part, outside of the concepts and new mechanics that you introduce in a Pokemon game, I think I'm past the point of needing in-depth tutorials for every single thing. Gym leaders can put up a little bit more of a challenge. Even the champion can put up a little bit more of a challenge. The trainers could be a little more threatening. The hardest thing about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are the event raid battles, by and far. And even then, 9 times out of 10, somebody has come up with a solution and a method to deal with those before the event even happens. I'll put it like this, I'm not a big fan of being ignored, especially when I am somebody that grew up with this franchise long enough to understand it in and out, and that I don't need to be babied anymore. Maybe one day we'll cross the threshold into maturity, but it definitely wasn't during this previous era, that much is for sure. Another thing that I absolutely despise is simply the fact that there is a complete lack of voice acting. Why is it that they're so afraid to give these characters actual voices that are somewhat consistent throughout the series? Like, why can we not have that? Why is it that every single time that we get a brand new Pokemon game that doesn't have voice acting in a scene that should clearly have voice acting, we are pointed directly back to the Piers scene in Pokemon Sword and Shield? I'm so sick of hearing about that, but we don't have a choice but to hear about it every single time because there is no excuse not to have some kind of voice present. It just doesn't make any sense anymore. Why are they so afraid or terrified of having a scene where a character genuinely speaks and actually has something to say that we can hear? What are we missing here? What's going on, guys? One part of me does have a general understanding as to why, and it's probably because it's costly to have something like voice actors, especially when you have a worldwide audience. So you would probably have to hire a bunch of different voice actors from a bunch of different countries with different languages, and that would just be a lot. And yet, I don't think it would be that big of a deal to have voice actors voice very specific animated scenes where it looks like they're talking. I don't think it's that crazy. Even from the Atlas RPGs like Persona and Metaphor, they are not voice acting every single line in the entirety of the game. They have a lot of voice acting, sure, but not every single scene. So it's more than okay to limit how much voice acting there is, as long as there is voice acting in spots where it looks like there should be voice acting. I don't think I'll ever get over this one, and I don't think I will until it actually happens, because it needs to happen now. And now the last thing that I've listed here that I hate about modern Pokemon is the grave lack of threats and villains lately. How is it that in the three most major games, being Sword and Shield, Legends Arceus, and Scarlet and Violet, there is no main villain? How is that a thing? Again, I don't really count Rose because he was trying to fix something that was nowhere near broken yet. Him and his goons didn't necessarily do anything evil. They were just kind of like there until the very end, where Rose pulled a nope, I'm doing this now, you guys can't stop me, and we had to stop him. And I don't really count Volo either because he is a post-game situation, one that has no effect on the main story at all. He shows up like what, 3 or 4 times maybe, and does absolutely nothing. And the professor's android was literally like, hey, you kind of should probably stop me at some point soon because this portal needs to close so that all of these Pokemon from, you know, another timeline don't seep all the way through and you guys get overflowed with all of these Pokemon. But that's another situation in which it was an overtime thing. Like, we just don't have any imminent threats anymore, and that's extremely strange to me. Where's our Giovannis, man? Where's our Cyruses at? Where are the people that will sacrifice people and Pokemon alike to get to their very selfish goal that may or may not be justified depending on their story? Hell, give us a Mewtwo situation, a Pokemon that is just so absolutely dangerous that it needs to be stopped, and in of itself is creating Pokemon or, you know, mind controlling Pokemon or whatever to do its evil bidding. What's happening here? Why do we not have threats and genuine villains anymore? I don't want to feel bad beating something like a Team Star Grunt, just some kid that was misguided. I don't feel good beating up a Team Yell player because they were just an egregious fanboy or fangirl. Like, there's no benefit to these characters getting beaten. It's just weird. Whatever the case may be, I've talked about this a good amount now. The point of it is, there is no way we can keep continuing this and not having genuine villains. We need actual antagonists to have a story, plain and simple. Now, trust me, I have plenty of other things that upset me about this franchise, but if we were to continue into all of it, we would be here forever. So I either already have them separated into videos I've done before, or I have them planned out for videos I have in the near future. So stay tuned if you're looking forward to hearing anything about that. Overall though, I think it's safe to say that I've made it very clear that I still very much love this franchise and still think that it has a lot to offer, despite the fact that it still treats us like children and doesn't really take itself seriously like it absolutely has the potential to. Just like a lot of you, I just hope that they take what's good and utilize that to its fullest potential, and take what's bad and, you know, fix what's not good. Simple as that. Who knows when that time will come, but hey, you know what? Maybe that's just me. So that just about does it for this one. Like I said at the beginning, I've been very occupied playing and making content for all of the new games that have been coming out this month, whether that be Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. I definitely plan to make some Metaphor content, and I've obviously made plenty of Sonic X Shadow Generations content. If that's something that you're interested in seeing, go ahead and check out my second channel, Soul Side Quests, where we discuss and talk about any and all other types of games that are not Pokemon. So, and you know, I've got some stuff to tell you guys on there too, so I think it's worth checking out. But other than that, I think I've said my piece for this one. So I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic over to you guys, and I want you guys to tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below. Do you agree with my likes and dislikes? Do you think that Pokemon has a lot of things to love, and you know, it's good that we cherish this series and that we could definitely see it improve in the future, and that our dislikes, or my dislikes in this case, are justified, and that they could definitely stand to utilize some fix-ups here and there? Or do you think that I am completely wrong, everything that I love about the series is completely wrong, and that all of those things need to be fixed up, and that my dislikes are actually some of the best things about it, and they don't need to be touched up at all? Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I am always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, it does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and do just that. I would like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm gone. So thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys on the next video. Do me the greatest favor, taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.